he's a very, easygoing, nice guy. He's only played sort of certain roles, but I thought in this he did really well.
He played a weak man learning his strength.
Yes, he did a really good job in that. Because when I first saw it had Matthew Broderick in it, I thought, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it's supposed to be Civil War. I'm thinking, how is he going to do this? But he did a great job because at the start, of course you believe him because he's weak, frightened, which anyone would be.
Absolutely, it's terrifying. I mean, your first time into battle.
Well, the way they, like I was saying to you during the week, it made my blood boil because I'm yelling at the screen, going, "Why are you just walking in front of cannons and guns?"
Can I answer that? Because there will be other people who would watch this film and not understand that
I'm
the
yelling
necessity.
Abuse at the screen.
Well, that's right. It's the necessity of it. You have to understand that in the Civil War, and I'm sure people may well try and correct me on this, but I'm right, so screw you. They were still using every time there is a conflict, the armies go into that conflict with the tactics that they had learnt that was effective in the previous war. Generals.
Of course, you're only going to come forward with what you've got.
Yes.
Until you learn something more based on the information you're provided with.
And they were running with the technology that was running from the Napoleonic years. Now, in the Napoleonic years, they were using rifles they weren't using rifles, they were using muskets. And what a musket is a smoothbore weapon which throws a lead projectile roughly somewhere in that direction, And so the only way of effectively killing a large group of people is to protect yourself, because not only were they put into these clumps, they had to protect themselves from cavalry, which was a lot more powerful in Napoleonic times. The only way you could protect yourself was to defend yourself with bayonets in tight clusters of groups of soldiers, sort of thing.
Spears and things.
Yeah. So that was why they were put together. Now, come the Civil War, a lot of these weapons, and you heard that these guys were handed Enfield rifle muskets, and what that means is that there was a groove that had been put into the barrel of these weapons that allowed the ball to spin. Now, a lot of this technology was becoming rapidly. And suddenly, so in the old muskets, they could only shoot somebody with some chance of hitting him from about 25 metres away. I don't know how many that is in feet, probably about 40 feet, 50 feet tops, where they had any chance of hitting a person, and more often than not, you could be shooting 3 or 4 rounds before you had a chance of hitting him.
Not to mention how long it takes you to actually get a round ready.
That's right. So you're 25 metres away from somebody and you're unloading your weapons, and so you all stand and you just take your pot luck, and you just stand there and you take it and you shoot back and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, with the Civil War, they were using rifled muskets, and these rifled muskets were able to shoot out fairly accurately to about 150 metres. And so almost immediately it's just simple arithmetic. If you've got cover and the other guy, like behind a wall or something like that, and the other guy hasn't got cover, you massacre them.
But like in the first scene, he's holding a sword.
Yes.
And he's, like you said, 25 metres away from them.
That's right.
And they're all just holding swords and just walking up to them. They're not even running or rushing. They're walking.
It was a very accurate... Look...
No, I'm sure it was incredibly accurate. Yeah. But it was me going, what? Why would you do that?
Yep.
It was incredibly frustrating. And also just the loss
because the tactics hadn't changed yet.
Oh, but even towards the end, which we're not going to ruin it for people... though history's already written, but, they're just waltzing up. And I'm thinking there's cannons.
Well, they didn't have...
Stupid.
Just like in the First World War, they didn't have the technology to get past the problem of the technology they had at the time until they brought the tank in.
I couldn't help yelling at the screen, though.
Yeah.
It was incredibly frustrating just watching the loss of life.
Yes, the pointlessness of it.
Yes.
Yes, but that's because you've got to work out the tactics.
Oh, I know, but...
Look, by the end of the Civil... You see, this is it. This is a strange thing
what was interesting about this film, though, is that you were emotionally involved. So I found I was emotionally involved. I cared about all these characters.
Yep.
You knew where they're all coming from.
Sure.
So
can I just say one more thing about the Civil War itself, rather than about the movie? Mm-hmm. That by the end of the Civil War, when they had a siege around, I think it was Virginia, Richmond, I think that's the capital of Virginia. Hi to our people in Virginia. Let us say hello to us and let us know if there's any information that you've you've got on this, whether I'm talking at me bum. But I don't think I am. But they had like large sieges. And by that stage of the game, the Union Army was employing trench warfare, as was, they'd all learnt that you could not stick your head out over the top of the parapet because people were able to pick them off at like 200 metres away.
The guns were more accurate.
Yeah, they're far more accurate. And so they had learnt after 4 or 5 terrible years that, the tactics were obsolete and the weapons had instilled their own new tactics. And the tactics that they created, it looked identical. They were using trench warfare. They had basic machine guns with the Gatling gun coming in right at the very end. They were also using what are called mines, where they dig underneath the enemy's trench underground, stack it full of explosives, and then blow it up. And there was quite a few periods where they just blew up whole sections of the Union. Oh, sorry, not the Union line. The Confederates. Thank you, the Confederates line, and they had these huge holes in the ground, just littered with troops, dead troops that had just been blown to Kingdom Come, sort of thing. So then they went over to the First World War, and of course nobody in the First World War in Europe had been really watching what the Americans were doing, because they would have seen all of this. This is why it came as such a shock.
They were using trench warfare in the First World War.
That's right, but they didn't understand what artillery, how quickly it had advanced, sort of thing. And if they'd gone and had a look and they'd taken notes at the end of the American Civil War, they would have seen everything that was in the First World War already being played out. Essentially, the American Civil War created modern warfare as we know it today. That's why it's an important film. And it's all of those aspects are represented in this movie, and that's kind of one of the reasons I like it and I hold it to such high esteem from a historical point of view. Putting that to one side, let's talk about the movie now.
Feel better?
Get that off my chest. Thank you, Pip, for letting me get that off. Yeah, that was good. Okay. I'll promise I won't talk about that stuff anymore.
Okay, about the movie, Paul.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
What did you like about the film, Paul?
The acting was superb. The acting was superb. Not a single bad actor in the whole thing. Not one.
You believe them all.
Yeah, they're all, even the bastards, like that racist guy who was.
Which one? There was a lot of them.
Well, they had the guys that were standing there watching watching the black troops moving up to the front of the assault sort of things, and they said, "Give them hell with 54th" and all the rest of it. It's very jingo-ish.
You saw that guy because they're the ones that had the confrontation with Morgan Freeman in the first place, and he said, "Do you want to get these guys in trouble?" And he went, "Oh, no, I'll be the bigger man."
And you know what?
Good. And then when they're going back to risk their lives, that guy's going, "Give them hell, go for it."
Because it wasn't about nationalism and it was about human dignity, for me, because like you get the old flag waving and all the rest of it, let's take them out, we're the Americans / the Australians / the English, whoever it is, that falls very flat with me nowadays.
But you have to admit, because this is a Civil War film, you've got Americans versus Americans. So they can't really do that.
That's right. It's based on the humanity of the people involved, who are all being...
Can't be written as we Americans are doing a great job, or we Aussies are doing a great job, or we English are great. So it's, it's Americans versus Americans. It's just we need to all agree and show that we're humans and we care about our fellow man.
Yep. As my philosophy now is that there is no such thing as a bad nation. Sorry, but there's not. There's just bad leaders. There's just bad leaders. You go back over the 20th century and you look at all those terrible societies, like the Nazi Germany, for example, was a classic example. There's going to be a section of society which will blindly follow no matter how heinous that leader is.
But when you say leader, you don't even mean politician. You mean the leaders of our society. That can be people who have the most money, people who have a higher social standing, people who have the highest number of companies or whatever. Yep. So it's just the leaders in our community.
And there were very many good people who tried to fight against, who were Germans themselves and who tried to fight against Nazi Germany. And there's a lot of people who just went, it's not affecting me at the moment. And it's the same in any society. You can't blame any period of time.
But it's also the same with African Americans in the 1960s where they're trying to get...
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter about what the society is because these things swing backwards and forwards all the time. We're all humans. We all do exactly the same things, and history does repeat itself.
Shouldn't. If you learn things, it shouldn't.
We've shown again and again that we don't learn things, so,
I know, it's frustrating.
I mean, look, the similarities, there's an old saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It rhymes. It's not quite the same each time it comes around.
I know,
but there's a lot. Very similar.
There's a lot of similarities.
It rhymes, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, come on. We stay on the film anyway because this is just like kitty little to me. I just love this stuff.
I think this is an important film to watch.
Yep.
I think... You thought I was going to go, oh, Paul, because you picked it. It must be bad.
Can I be honest? I suspect that you were going to do another odd, angry shot at me on this film.
That was different. That wasn't a great film.
You think this is a great film?
I think it's a film that people should watch. I think there's some great thoughts, great acting, great portrayals of how things were back then.
Yep.
I think it's also helpful now because it makes people think. You have to actually think about this film.
Right.
I also got emotionally involved in the characters, the way they're written. So it's actually written well where you go, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Ah!
Now, look, can we talk about spoilers for a second? Because it's a very old film. It's 1989.
Yeah, but a lot of people haven't seen it.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, this is
what
why.
Do you want to say?
Well, this is why.
Go and say it anyway.
This is why I want people to go and watch the films as we watch them.
It's a film based on history, so a lot of it people will know already.
Oh, sure, but it's how we portray these films, and how
Paul, go ahead. I'm listening.
I liked the very last scene as they're sliding into the grave, so to speak, and I just thought it was very poetic, very sensitive. Just the massive humanity in this, and the deep respect for everybody involved. This is the one film, this is strange, almost every American Civil War film, and I've seen them all, that comes out, because I can't get enough of the American Civil War.
I just assume you like war films, period.
Well, I do, but I find the American Civil War particularly interesting because it's a transitional war. It is the focal point between warring in the old style, and then it is the birth of industrialised warfare, and that's why I just can't get enough of it. And also the First World War, but you'll see that all of the themes that go on in the First World War were laid out in the Civil War.
Anyway,
I've lost my.
You're saying you've seen all the Civil War films?
Yes, this is the only one that I know of that doesn't give the South a chance to speak.
Ah, yes.
Every time they have an American Civil War, they'll like Gettysburg, for example, they had those 3 soldiers that were sitting there, and and the guy had to ask the question, why are you fighting? It's they don't even give him the opportunity. They don't give. So it's a bit one-sided in that respect. And I guess the only thing you see in this film.
They're not looking at the whole Civil War, though. They're concentrating mostly on the 54th.
They're not. But
Massachusetts regiment.
You can't separate any of this stuff.
But what I'm saying is, it's a very small picture. Basically, there's lots of issues regarding the Civil War, but they're looking specifically at this regiment and how it affected African Americans in this war.
I just find it very interesting, and I don't know why they did that, but I'm sure it was a conscious choice.
I think it works in well with a storyline for that specific thing.
Yep, fair enough. Now, look,
did you think it was? It would have been better to actually see the South Side. For this particular film, I mean.
Look, I'm going to get in trouble with